And at the start of the board, part of the things we look forward to is to celebrate the Going the Extra Mile Award. So we've got quite a few guests on the line to celebrate the Going Extra Mile winners. So with your forbearance, I will read out the Going the Extra Mile Award winners. So first up is the clinical winner. And I'm just checking, we've got Linda on the line. Linda, welcome. Linda, what I'll do is I'll read out the commendation. So the summer 2021 clinical award winner is Linda Ward, Associate Director of, or Acting Associate Director of Midwifery, after a member of staff nominated you for being extremely approachable and compassionate and for always going the extra mile to support staff. The person who nominated you commented how special you are and how appreciated you are by the team you lead, the glue that keeps them together. They also said that the care you provide to women and families and the importance you place on staff well-being is inspirational. Lynn supports and cares for every member of staff individually, they wrote. She believes happy and healthy staff are imperative to a successful, safe and efficient service. So Linda, hopefully you can hear us. Big round of applause from the board. Thank you for being a Going the Extra Mile Clinical Award winner for the summer of 2021. So we then go on to the non-clinical winner, and that's Sarah. Just seeing if Sarah's on the line. I can't see Sarah on the line, but nonetheless, I'll sort of read out the commendation. So Sarah is our locality manager for Health Visiting Warwickshire and was chosen for your incredible decision making, open and honest leadership approach and organisational skills. The person who nominated you said that during a time when the team were undergoing difficulties with recruitment due to a national shortage of health visitors, the team were asked to assist in the health assessments of Afghan refugees across Warwickshire and Rugby. Sarah led on this, building up very quickly relationships with local agencies and partners to ensure health needs were met in a timely manner. The person who nominated you also commentated that you were instrumental in embedding new pre and post COVID-19 pathways. You engaged with parents who didn't support the new virtual pathways and their network to find out what changes the service could make. And this included overhauling the service's Facebook pages, exploring other avenues of communication and commissioning a new website that was fit for purpose. Sarah's also become a trustee to the network's newfound charity status and provides open dialogue and engagement with the mums. So Sarah, on behalf of the board, big round of applause for being our non-clinical Going the Extra Mile winner. Then the team winners are McGregor Ward and the infant feeding team. So both teams were awarded the team Going the Extra Mile award. McGregor Ward were chosen after they received a nomination for the swift action, outstanding care and attention the team collaboratively provided the person who nominated you, twins. The nominator said during a very scary time, all the staff didn't just do their jobs, they went above and beyond and were very kind, caring, supportive, and couldn't have provided better care when the twins were admitted on 2 separate days with the same condition. On both occasions, the multidisciplinary team provided the same high standard of care to both the patient and parent. And I know just that's one example out of a whole series we could give about the fantastic work that goes on McGregor Ward. So big round of applause for the McGregor Ward. And then the infant feeding team were awarded for the level of knowledge, evidence-based recommendations, patience and empathy they showed, and the clear, consistent and really helpful information they provided to the nominator and their wife, while offering nothing but positivity and being incredibly empathetic. The nominator said the infant feeding team are one of the most approachable hospital departments they've ever dealt with. They also commented that despite busy schedules, the team always made time for them to explain their concerns and provided in-depth and lengthy counselling advice. The couple never felt rushed or that they were on a time-pressured appointment. They also said the feeding team seemed to be a department that you've not heard of until you need help. But then when you need the help, you don't know how you could have possibly managed without them. So to the infant feeding team, Going the Extra Mile Team Award winners with McGregor, thank you very, very much. So really great examples there, team, and we can't thank you enough for your ongoing work, and wish you well. You're very welcome to stay with us, Julia and everyone else, for the rest of the board session. You've missed a bullet because you don't have to have your photograph taken with me, which is one of the advantages of this being a digital rather than a physical meeting. And if I don't see you before Christmas, I wish you all a very, very happy Christmas and thank you for your hard work. So I don't think we've got any apologies for absence, and welcome to members of the public. This is a special board as well, which I'll come back to later, because this is the final board where my Deputy Chair Bruce Paxton will be joining us, given that we don't have a January board. Bruce has been an absolutely exceptional non-executive director for SWFT, and an incredible help to me as chair, having taken over the deputy chairmanship in difficult circumstances, and Bruce has showed a level of maturity and wisdom which I've always greatly appreciated. Any new declarations of interest, team? Please raise a digital hand. Rosemary?
Yes, I do. Just have to declare that I'm doing some work, administration work with the South Warwickshire GP Federation with the vaccine rollout, so on a temporary basis.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Rosemary. And any other new declarations of interest? Okie dokie. Sue, if I could just ask you to put your mic on or go on to mute, that would be super. So the last set of minutes, was everyone happy with the accuracy of the last set of minutes? Please raise a digital hand if you want any amends. Can't see any digital hands raised. So we then go to the action points arising. And the first was to invite bank staff to take part in a staff story session. We had a great session this morning where one of our junior members of the team, Melissa, presented to us about their experience on bank. First time I've ever met Melissa. If ever there was a potential for someone becoming a director of nursing in 20 years' time, Melissa, I think, would be a great example. We had a very interesting discussion on bank. Thank you. On the integrated performance dashboard, Kim to bring back trajectory details for the trust on community infrastructure levy. Thank you for circulating that by email, Kim. The CIL is an important element of where people building new houses, new estates in the community make a contribution to the hospital and other organisations that apply for the CIL, and that's been significant given the number of houses that are being built. So thank you for that, Kim. Charles to provide mortality performance comparison information within the mortality report. Charles, do you just quickly want to explain the differences in the systems here?
Yeah, there are two systems within the group as to where we get our mortality benchmark information. Y Valley, which can do name comparators, comes from Birmingham University Hospitals, and ours comes from a company called CHKS. So we can provide comparators, but they won't be labelled. And I've asked the information department to put that in in the next mortality report. So it's as good as we can get with our information provider.
Okay, great. Thank you, Charles. And then also on the clarification on mortality reviews within the mortality report, does that pick up on the issue about the interim IT solution?
You will see there's a new page there which gives more information, but just having looked at it, I understand the point of the question, and that is that we look at a number of deaths where the mortality risk-based tool would say death was unlikely, and therefore it's more likely to be potentially avoidable death. And that was, I think, the nuance that was causing confusion last time. And this is how we pick a sample of deaths where a concern hasn't been raised.
No, thank you, Charles. Then on the next point is about the sustainability report. Thank you, Sophie. We talked about our sustainability strategy going forward at the board workshop this morning. So look forward to that being finalised at the next board. Then Glenn, to keep the board appraised on the work on the PATH service. Unfortunately, Glenn wasn't able to go to that meeting. I was. It was a far more assuring meeting compared to the last one we had, albeit that was 2 years ago. I made a number of points about the frequency of the meeting and the need to benchmark the performance of our pathology network compared to others nationally. And I think those points were noted. There has been an improvement for our patients and citizens in terms of the pathology network operating performance over the last 6 months, and I'm reasonably assured that that will continue. But the fact we're now putting those board meetings, or the fact our colleagues who chair the meeting are now putting it back on a regular board cycle, I think will be helpful, and Glenn and I will update as appropriate. Monthly safe staffing report. The executive team should ensure the non-clinical staff be reviewed on a quarterly basis to make sure we expose any staffing challenges. That's ongoing. Thank you, Anne. Fiona, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I just wonder, because that's an ongoing one that we've seen month on month for about 6 months now. I wonder whether we transfer that across to F&P, because I haven't had a chance to talk to Gertie, but I think there's something about putting it into the F&P workforce papers rather than bringing it to board. Gertie, I don't know. Sorry, I'm just I haven't prepped you on this one at all.
What do you think, Gertie?
I think we could probably do a little bit of both. I think the granular detail absolutely sits in F&P, but what I'd like to do is, and I'm talking to the team about developing the IPR onwards, so that we can at least see vacancies at a trust level by staff group, which will give us as a board a little bit more assurance in that. So I think it could most likely go to FP, but we will start to build it into the IPR as well moving forward. So a bit of both. Okay, great. Thanks, Gertie. And Glenn, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, we need to make sure that the new board dashboard has some good HR indicators on there, so we'll incorporate it in that.
Great, thank you, Glenn. And then final point was on Black Swan events be provided for next March, and that's under control. Okie dokie. Any matters arising that I've missed? Okay, team, so I think we therefore move on to items for approval, and we've got the Foundation Group Strategy Subcommittee Terms of Reference. Glenn.
Thank you, Russell, and also thank you for picking up my action item earlier. So the changes to the subcommittee terms of reference actually relate to a matter that's covered in my Chief Executive report in a moment, which I'll talk about a little bit more around the associate members joining us, but also tidies up a few other things. So the proposed changes are tracked there, mainly around the membership of the committee, including firstly our chief strategy officers from across the group as members. Secondly, adding in any associate members that we have, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we also included a line around other group advisors. And just picking up a comment that Sue made as non-exec, Sue, that those would be appointed group advisors, so it's not covering anyone who's giving advice to the group. It would be those other appointed group advisors. It includes the scope of doing the comparative performance work, which we're really keen to get on and do, and also just tidies up the frequency, which is minimum quarterly, but more if necessary. That's all I wanted to highlight, if that's okay, Chairman.
Thank you. And helpful clarification from Sue, Whelan, Tracy. Any questions or perspectives on these? If you're not happy to approve the amendments to the terms of reference, please raise a digital hand. I can't see any digital hands raised. Duly approved. Thank you, Sarah and Glenn. So Glenn, we then move on to your, I think, largest executives report there's ever we've worked together. Over to you.
Yeah, apologies for the size of this report. One of the main reason for it is that I included within this report the content of the group review rather than doing a separate paper. So, and I won't go through all of it. You'll all be pleased to hear. I'm sure you've read it all. I just wanted to draw out three things that are the most significant elements of the report. Firstly, the very first item is the strengthening of the partnership between the Trust and Warwick University, particularly here around the Warwick Medical School. But we've also been strengthening our partnership with the business school as well. And what we will be doing with the medical school is setting up a really significant research partnership into the next decade, which looks at truly integrated care delivery, which is one of the reasons why they're particularly keen to work with us and the rest of the foundation group, because we have a kind of unique setup, probably the biggest provider in the country of that kind of integrated care between hospital and community services. So really excited about that. Alongside that, a non-executive appointment by the university, which you, Chairman, have discussed with our governors. And also moving forward to become a university trust. Importantly, not using the university hospital. So we're not a hospital trust because we're much more than that, but a university trust. And that's something that we will progress through the coming months. I then wanted to talk about the effectiveness of the booster, COVID booster. I just wanted to draw this one out, particularly because of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks with Omicron, but also the really strong evidence that shows that the booster is incredibly effective. It's odd, really, isn't it, when you think back 2 years ago, the fear that we had around COVID. If we'd known then that we would have a vaccine that was 93, 94% effective, we would have been incredibly pleased. We'd also been rather surprised that some people are not taking it in that context as well. So every opportunity we get, we do need to reinforce, and I certainly had one this week, reinforce the opportunity for people to take up the COVID booster, and obviously that will now be rolled out for all adults. I won't go through all of the other items. The only other one I wanted to draw out was on page 5 of my report, where we talk about the strengthening of the foundation group. There's a lot of content in there which we discussed previously in confidential board and has been approved by all 3 boards in the group, which is the way that we work. But the introduction of associate membership and the welcoming of Worcester Acute Hospitals as an associate member following approval of their board a week or so ago is a really exciting move. Gives us an opportunity to benchmark with more clinical teams to identify more clinical best practice in all 4 acute providers, and to just have a wider network of an organisation that's got similar components to ours. And I think that's one of the strengths of it, the scale of their district general hospitals. And they've actually got 2 district general hospitals within Worcester Acute. It's very similar to ours, and therefore there's some real opportunities to share and to learn together. And then the report goes on, as you say, it goes on and on, Chairman, and it talks about things like the child health team and some of their agile working improvements during COVID, and also includes our GEM Award winners in all their glory. So that's all I was going to tease out from the report, if that's okay.
Thank you, Glenn. And I think the other important aspect about Worcester Acute joining us as an associate member is it's a case of enlightened self-interest. With all of our partner organisations, we need to ensure that they're performing in a way that doesn't affect us through things like ambulance transfers. So I think that's the other sort of hidden benefit to us all. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you for your hard work. Any questions or perspectives on Glenn's report? Rosemary?
Glenn, can I just ask for clarification on the funding? The 7.7 million funding for the community diagnostic hubs. Has that been approved, or are we still waiting to hear on that one?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. The community diagnostic hubs, which you now have to call community diagnostic centres, they've decided from the centre, that has been approved. The funding for the TIF funding, as it's called, for the elective recovery funding, we've had informal approval, but we haven't received final confirmation of it yet. So that's the urology scheme that we refer to. But yeah, the initial community diagnostic hub has been approved, and we're cracking on with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Glenn, you talk about COVID vaccination, and clearly it's the right thing to do to try and get all those members of staff non-vaccinated vaccinated before the deadline. But are there any areas of the hospital that have a higher proportion of non-vaccinated staff and are particularly causing a concern around this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I wouldn't say necessarily there are particular areas, but there are particular groups of staff that have tended to have concerns since the vaccine came out, and some of that's just the history of how it happened. So if you take, for example, pregnant members of staff, that there was initially a view that there wasn't enough evidence to confirm its safety, but there is evidence to confirm its safety now. So it's just some legacy information that we need to ensure that our staff have. So I'm not overly concerned about this. There are obviously some groups of staff that are nervous about having the vaccine, have some concerns. Anyone who has a genuine health reason would obviously not be forced to take the vaccine. And I think through persuasion, we can get ourselves into a really strong position by the time we get to the 4th of February, which is actually the time at which everyone needs to have had the first dose in order to meet the deadline. So we're definitely taking the approach of encouragement at this stage. But obviously we have that looming deadline that could be a worry for us. And we'll update you as we move forward with that, Simon.
Great, thank you, Simon. And any other questions or perspectives? I think your point's well made, Simon. Clearly, there are certain services like maternity that we need to be absolutely certain of, that we're not going to lose capacity to the issue of the double vaccination. Should we move on then to the integrated performance dashboard, including the mortality report? Anne, would you care to lead on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So month 7 remains a challenging period in terms of quality, operational and people performance. This is the first month in which we have got chief officers, and it marks the move from directors to chiefs. So they will go through in detail and providing detail on the key points that I've identified in the managing director's summary. And finally, finance was a little unclear at the time of writing, and again, the Chief Finance Officer will provide an update, the latest update, I'm sure, as we go through the detail of the finance section. So hopefully we've got the clarity that was uncertain at the time of writing. So thank you. And over to the chiefs.
Thank you. And so the first chief is the Chief Nursing Officer report. Fiona? Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. So just in summary, as I'm assured, and I hope the board is, about the improvement work that we've been doing on the children in crisis and the safe discharge work. I think it is paying dividends in terms of that quality improvement work. Improvement or work is continuing in the I Want Great Care to increase those rates again post pandemic. And I've put some detail in terms of the ideas we've had this week or this month, sorry, of trying to improve those rates. And then the only other one is that, you can see that the number of people that have fallen in month has increased, but actually the rate has not significantly. And that's really a reflection of the activity in the hospital at the moment. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Fiona. Any questions or perspectives to Fiona? David?
Yes, it's Fiona. You mentioned it right at the end about the autism review, but there's no detail on what sort of things have been identified that might need to be addressed to deal with that, or hasn't there been anything identified?
Yeah, so the special educational needs review was undertaken across Warwickshire, and the feedback was actually given to Warwickshire City Council and CCG leads on special educational needs, including autism. The main concerns that came out of that do sit in commissioners, really, in terms of the waiting list for first assessment and diagnosis of autism, and the support prior to that diagnosis and afterwards, both to the child and the family. We as at SWFT have a part to play in that, in terms of system working together and supporting system partners to put in improvement plan and response to Ofsted and CQC on the back of that report, and obviously support the improvement work in the future. The specific thing that we're doing in terms of our services is increasing the education to the staff as an immediate action that we can do, and we've been shared the educational resources that the City Council have been using with their staff, and we're going to roll that out to our staff as essential training within some services. So that's the first action.
Sure. I mean, it was the actions for this trust that I was in. I knew about the other actions. It was whether there was any identified that the trust's got to make, and I suspect it is more to do with how our staff actually communicate effectively with people with autistic spectrum disorder.
Yeah, certainly within the hospital, there was some recommendations about reducing waiting lists for speech and language therapy in this population, which was work that we were doing already, but that was just picked up as part of that review.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Fiona. Any other questions to Fiona? Otherwise, we'll move on to Harkamel. So, Harkamel, over to you. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. So October remained a real challenge for our 4-hour performance. We carried on seeing a high number of attenders with a steady stream of COVID numbers through ED that didn't necessarily translate into admissions, but made managing those patients in ED really challenging. And as with the previous month, we continued to have phases of time where we had significant pressure of people bunching up, which made managing the flow of those patients really challenging. We also implemented a new IT system, which brought about its own challenges, and that's definitely reflected in the performance. There are definitely some lessons learned from that, and there's an action plan in place for each of the issues that we've identified. Just to kind of put out there, activity does remain around 10% higher than pre-pandemic, and bed occupancy remains high. So we're not getting any of the relief that we sort of used to see pre-pandemic, where bed occupancy would drop off, and that remains playing out. Just by way of assurance, we do have our surge plans in place, and we are working through our winter plan and working with the system on how we can try and decompress some of the pressures here. I think the most important bit of that is our work with the ambulance team. Elective activity also increased, but we did, despite all the pressure through the front door, maintain our green pathway, and we haven't compromised that. So I think that's really, really important. RTT performance did fall, but we expected it to, because we are closing more pathways in line with the H2 work. And for the first time, our open pathway numbers actually went down for the first time since July 2020, which is what you want to see in terms of stabilisation of a waiting list. We also carried on with our reduction of 52-week waiters, so we now have 376, which is a significant decrease compared to April. And we're still on plan to have no 104s by the end of the year. We submitted 9 last month. The diagnostic target, we didn't achieve the 99%, we achieved 98.6%, but all of the radiology modalities achieved, which is no mean feat. And definitely you can see the knock-on of that with our H2 performance in terms of getting those diagnostics done and closing those clocks. Cancer remains stable, and importantly, the 28-day within that is stable, especially now that the 2-week wait measure is going to be removed from April. Lower GI, head and neck, urology and gynae are our key areas of support. We have action plans in place and there's a lot of system support, including working with our GP colleagues on how we can streamline some of those pathways. H2 achieved 98.8% against a target of 89%, which is fantastic. And the system did really well as well. So that's good news all round. And I know I said it last month, but again, we had the highest number of births in October than we've ever had before. So hopefully I won't say that again, but just to note that those numbers are increasing and certainly one to watch. And now we're doing a piece of work to map out what that impact will be on the other services that sit within that division, given that we manage the entire service from pre-birth to 18. We think it's important to try and map out some of that likely impact that I can feed back.
That's great, really comprehensive. Just remind us, because I couldn't quite see it in the report, how many births did we have?
We had 293.
Okay, thank you. So, questions or perspectives to Harkamel? Glenn?
Just to add, to correct the Chief Operating Officer there, lots of births is a good thing, isn't it, for our local community? So don't see it as a negative. But yeah, it does put us under pressure, but and we need to respond accordingly. I mean, the performance, Harkamel, is really good. Just, you know, you look at a load of indicators in there, and under the circumstances, we're doing really well. The one that we're worried about, of course, is urgent care, obviously because it will get worse over the winter in terms of the pressure. So I know you and lots of other execs have been working on some things, and I was going to maybe ask Charles, and Charles' hands up, to maybe just give us an update on the internal professional standards work. So this is the looking at how we ensure we've got flow as best we can over the winter. So Charles, is that something you could comment on?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that there are difficulties getting home care packages, the difficulties in discharges, which is putting pressure on the system. But we really have to make absolutely sure that we do everything that is within our control to the very highest standard and as timely as possible. So we are looking at, through a 10-point plan, to every opportunity to improve things, and that includes very clear professional standards for consultants and junior doctors as to how they respond to emergencies and respond to the emergency department. So although there will sometimes be clinical priorities, they need to make absolutely this their priority, because it's about patient safety and it's ultimately about unloading ambulances. And I was going on to say really something that Harkamel should be very proud of from an operational point of view is, despite all of this, that we have maintained our elective performance, because that doesn't only mean patients in our community get their operations, but emergency patients in elective beds, that has all sorts of problems for the patients, for the staff, and reducing efficiency. So the fact that we've held on to that, I think, is something absolutely to be commended.
Thank you, Charles. And David Spraggett, please.
Hi. Yeah, my question is really about there's a bit of a paradox in some of the data, in that our activity in ED was lower than we would have expected, or lower than it had been. Yet for some reason our 4-hour target was the worst it's been, and our ambulance handovers were the worst it's been. That seems to be a complete back to front. Can you just give me some idea why that might have happened? I have a sneaking suspicion I know, but you're going to tell me, aren't you?
Yeah, so you're not wrong, and I think that's the problem when you're talking about the 4-hour performance, when you can't succinctly kind of give the one reason why it is how it is. You know, I think that story is quite hard to follow through. With October specifically, we have to account for the nerve centre implementation because that does reflect in the performance. But even if you take that out, we still did struggle, and we would have still seen performance that was no better than August, which is I think the time period that you're referencing when we saw a similar number of admissions. And the issue really centres around the bit I spoke around before. In the last few months, we've really seen patients coming in clusters. So at any time we can have 80, 90 in a department, and we weren't seeing that in August. And that is a really unusual phenomenon. So when we are mapping through kind of the peak times of demand within ED, that then becomes really challenging because it doesn't necessarily coincide with when our assessment areas are open. So that's one of the pieces of work that we're doing to make sure that our assessment capacity is open to match these new peaks in demand, because it doesn't match any of the trend data that we've seen before, which is not unexpected given that we've not been in this context before. So that's one facet of it, and I think it's really important to kind of remember that we have comparatively we do have a small ED. So when we see pressure like that all at the same time with limited assessment capacity, it's basically a pressure cooker, and it takes a while then to release that and get the organisation back on track. When you then think about where these patients are then going, we don't have the bed capacity that we had in August. When we look at like some of the admissions and the discharge packages that we had, the position was much better then. We are now in a position where we are struggling with patients leaving the organisation, and we don't have that flex. I think another really important bit is some of the ambulance behaviour. We've made changes internally to try and manage the ambulance handovers in a much better way alongside our colleagues in the ambulance service, and we're trying to, and that will continue to evolve as we try and get that right. But equally, we have seen patterns of behaviour from them where we are seeing multiple ambulances at our site when that's not being seen by our neighbouring trusts, or when the entire system is pressured and we are then getting out of area referrals. And I think the issue, and I think I said this last time, is that it's the sum of all the parts. Even though individually these are quite small things, there's a lot of them, and then that is then reflected in the performance.
Kamal, that's a really comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, it is counterintuitive though. If you just look at the ball figures, it doesn't. It seems back to front, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a really good explanation. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Dave. And just quickly moving on, because we've got a lot to cover this afternoon. Sue? Sorry, before I go to Sue, Charles, is there something you wanted to add to?
Just very quickly to add, that the ED performance is a whole hospital target, and when the ED can't actually discharge patients to beds as well as community, that causes big problems in the timing of it. So that relates to what I was saying about professional standards and trying to get the discharges earlier in the day, and really reduce our length of stay.
How many people do we have in a bed at the moment, Kamal, who could go home, but there isn't an ability to send them home?
In the organisation today, we have 39 who are awaiting formal packages of care. And
so I would just say to our social care colleagues, and if anyone ever wonders why social care is so important to the NHS, today's an example. There are 39 people who should be able to go home. There will be 39 free beds today, which we can't send them home because there are various issues about sending them home, but they're ready to go home. If they're able if they're able to go home, the cost per day of them being at home with a care package is about £40 a day. Every day they stay in the hospital costs £300 a day. So that puts into context the economic case, let alone the human case. Just moving it forward though, Sue, and then we'll move on.
Yes, Kamal's answered one of my points, which was going to be around the clusters of arrivals. But I just wanted to make a plea around plain English in the report, because we're now talking about clock stop, for example, which really doesn't mean anything to members of the public. And I've been having some feedback about trying to keep things in plain English. So I know Anne COIL, you were looking at some other trusts and how they use that. But I think that discussion we just had on discharges, for example, is much clearer to understand than what's written. So appreciate all the work everyone's doing. And but
no, that's fair. I'll take that on board.
No, very helpful. Thank you, Harkamel. And Harkamel, it's great to see you being so on top of the brief. Very well done. We'll keep the pace moving because we have got a lot to cover. I think I'm with you, Gertie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I think my section is probably written in as plain as English as can possibly be done. So I'll be very quick because I think it speaks for itself. I think there's some really positive moves going ahead with recruitment. We do still have quite a lot of challenges, but it is really positive to see that with a 15% nursing gap that we've got 116 Band 5 nurses already recruited and coming into the organisation, with 28 of them having already got agreed start dates. Our other pressure point is obviously our clinical support workers. And again, there are just short of 55 whole-time equivalents in there, and 18 of those have booked start dates. So there's some real positive progress moving forward, and Fiona and I are doing a joint piece of work to try and streamline our recruitment and induction for these really important staff groups. So I would hope to see an improvement in time to hire moving forward. Again, other elements, and Fiona refers to it later in her safe staffing report about recommencing our international recruitment with an ambition to having 22 overseas nurses in by the end of, or appointed by next April. Sickness continues to remain a target, and obviously we know that we usually see a seasonal increase at this time of the year and over the course of the winter. Our two highest reasons for absence continue to be stress and musculoskeletal, and we're honing and responding with our support interventions to respond to that. Core skills training is not included in this month, but will be included monthly moving forward, and appraisal is in there. Both of these are below the trust target, and we're working through the finance performance executive meeting to ask the divisions to develop trajectories so that we will see an improving performance in this. I'll leave it at that, Chair, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Very helpful. Thank you, Gertie. Any questions or perspectives to Gertie? Okay, great. Thank you, Gertie, for that clarity. So we'll move on to an area where plain English and clarity is never the easiest of things on NHS finances. Kim, do your best.
Thank you, Russell. I was about to say the same thing because it's been probably the most confusing year I've ever experienced in all my time in the NHS, and I've been in the NHS quite a while. So there we go. The paper hopefully tries to set out some of the changes that have been going on with the money in the last month, actually. So it's been a number of changes, but the board will be aware that we were given the guidance very late, and also the allocations for the second half of the year very late. The key point is that at a point in time, we thought that we were looking at a deficit position for the second half of the year, and we were asked to submit our plan and our year-to-date position on the basis of that being a gap. NHSIE then subsequently confirmed that they were prepared to underwrite a level of income in relation to the elective recovery fund of about £4 million, which meant that we would be in a position to submit a break-even plan, and that would therefore impact on our year-to-date position, which at the time was a reported deficit of £700,000. But by confirmation of receiving that income, that would obviously significantly improve our position closer to the break-even position. Hopefully that makes sense. Our cash position still remains strong at about 36 million. Agency, just draw attention to agency, and I know we obviously heard a bit more about our bank staff and temporary workforce, and it's just to give assurance to the board that Gertie, Fiona and myself are working and looking at options on how we can manage our temporary workforce, and there will be a paper in due course around what our recommendations are moving forward. CPIP is challenging. You will obviously have heard all the operational challenges and workforce challenges that we're dealing with. We have been working with the divisions to try and look forward around what sort of schemes we can look at for future. But it is challenging. The productivity charts that you'll see in the report do kind of reflect, I suppose, the again, very similar sort of trajectory to the operational performance and the staffing challenges, as you would expect them, because they do correlate. So I think that's all I wanted to highlight at the moment. Glenn's already mentioned we were successful in receiving notification of TIF funding. We're just waiting for just a final confirmation on precisely the scheme that we're going to proceed and move forward on. That's all I wanted to highlight for now.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any questions or perspectives to Kim? So barring a calamity, we should be break even at worst, Kim. Thank you. Okay, well done. And thank you for your diligence in sort of working through the treatment of the various different machinations of the finances. I think the other thing that's worth just pointing out to members of the public, it is going to be very important as we start to work on the numbers on an integrated care system level, that a fair shares allocation of the monies is always a founding principle and philosophy as to the way the money is allocated. Charles, the mortality review, anything you would like to pull out?
No, I think we still see a stable picture with the mortality indicators well within control limits, and you will see that there's a new page there, which pending our IT system gives, I think, a clearer view of what the difference between mortality screening is from the medical examiners for deaths, and how then this goes on to the higher tier reviews. So nothing to add apart from that.
That's great. Thank you, Charles. Having a cat intervene on Rosemary's video there. Any questions to Charles on mortality? Not sure what the weather is like with you guys. It's become slightly biblical in my little corner of Warwickshire. The weather's terrible. So we'll move on then. Also, I apologise, Rosemary.
Sorry, yeah, I think Kat came inside because of the weather. But yeah, question for you, Charles. You note that there were 6 deaths which have been assessed as avoidable in the last 12-month period, September to September. If I'm right, that seems higher than usual. And so how many of those are in some ways COVID related?
I don't think any of them are COVID related. The numbers are so small that it's difficult to do any statistics, but you're right. I think we were probably 2 in the year before, and some of these relate to serious incidents that have been very, very carefully looked at, and then they come to the Mortality Surveillance Committee to agree that they're avoidable. There's no real pattern in the incidents, and you will be aware of them through the Clinical Governance Committee because they've been SUIs and signed off.
Okay, so they're not, I mean, when I talk about COVID related, I'm talking about the whole pressures as well.
No, I think it would be difficult to attribute to them to COVID. I mean, they're a very diverse group in different specialties.
Yeah, no, thanks for that clarification, Charles.
Apologies, guys, really do need to pick up the pace, but thank you, Charles. We'll move on then to the monthly safe staffing report. Fiona, over to you.
Yeah, this is the normal report showing a 4% gap in community, highlighting some areas with a larger than average vacancy position, particularly McGregor, Farries, A&E in the acute, theatres in the acute, and then children's and OT services in the community. I think what I particularly wanted to pull out of this report as additional to normal, though, is in section 12, which is my proposed escalation plan and for winter. This is similar to last year, so you remember I present something similar most years in terms of just giving assurance, and getting approval from the board of directors for how we manage staffing when it does get short in areas. So the principles of rostering and managing safe staffing, particularly in the hospital, is that we make sure that every department has one qualified nurse that is substantive, that we plan to have 1 to 8 nurses, 1 nurse to 8 patients as a bare minimum in the daytime and 1 to 10 at night. And we plan to have a substantive registered nurse that's competent to take charge on every ward. That's what we plan for, but it doesn't always happen with short-term sickness or the additional activity and capacity areas that we have to open at short time frames sometimes. So I've laid out the things that we would do at those times in terms of having a governance structure around it. Again, that's the plan, and we will plan for that. We monitor rosters being developed with those principles and being approved 6 weeks ahead, and bank and agency being put out in a timely manner. This winter we've implemented a matron of the day rota where the matrons are managing staffing Monday to Friday 9 to 5 to support the capacity team being released to manage capacity. That's expected to be ongoing until April at the earliest. We have negotiated with temporary staffing agencies, block booking where we can, anticipating gaps in some rosters. We would, when we need to, negotiate with students in the university and trainee nursing associates to work within number. We certainly did that last year, and bolstered the volunteers to support inpatient ward areas. And then we do, when the pressure is even tighter and the gaps are larger, go out to any nurse that is registered still, but not clinical, such as general managers, practice development nurses, clinical nurse specialists. That's easier said than done. Sometimes we can go out to ask, but that's at that point with the business continuity plans, which we put in and refreshed in COVID, would step in terms of what they would step down either in any of those teams in terms of the work that they normally do. And obviously we continue, and Gertie's team fronts this the majority of the time, publicly in terms of that staff wellbeing offers and opportunities, but obviously that's reiterated through managers as well. If out of hours from an on-call point of view or unexpectedly, then the nurse staffing goes below a safe ratio, then I've laid out again what we may need to do, and that is about reducing the ratio of 1 to 8 or 1 to 10, bringing in additional support workers rather than registered nurses to give basic care and keep that privacy and dignity and safety element focused in the team's principles, but maybe not with actually registered nurses. We would do that on a day-to-day basis, and obviously would report that as an incident, and we'll manage that in hours to reverse that as soon as we possibly can by, again, pulling in those additional people. That would be a senior nurse that would take that risk assessment and would be signed off by the exec on call. And then finally, I've just made reference again to the business continuity plans. I think we learned a lot through COVID of what we could step down and what we and how to do those risk assessments, particularly in non-urgent services. So that would step in as if staffing got very tricky, to make sure that the urgent care delivery was maintained. So happy to take questions on that.
Thank you, Fiona. Questions or perspectives to Fiona? Not necessarily for now, Fiona, but could I ask between you and Gertie to just brief me, happy to be outside the board, as to how our usage of bank compares to our usage of agency. So how many hours of bank do we use in a typical month compared to how many hours of agency that we use, and compare that to how many full-time people, our own people, we use. It's difficult for me to see from the report the simplicity of that sort of metric. Thank you. Colleagues, happy to move on? Obviously things stressed, but keep us briefed, Fiona. If I could ask colleagues with their committee reports to be as efficient as possible. So first of all, David.
Yeah, take the report as read. The only thing I really want to flag is the additional pressure on the workforce for the out of hospital community care. There's actually been caused because of the staffing issues in domiciliary and care home market, and I think that this is an example of where the wider community can actually impact on our workforce, and I think it's a risk that potentially could get greater over the next few months. But other than that, I've got nothing else to add.
Thank you, David. Any questions or perspectives, David? Glenn, do we need to do a better job, just building on what David's just said to us as it's come up before, to let our colleagues in social care know about our anxiety, about the fragility of the social care sector and the way it's affecting our work?
Certainly we've had those direct discussions. It's maybe something I could take on to the provider collaborative agenda also, because we have social care colleagues there. As you know, Russell, in the background of this, I've also asked for regular reporting on the fulfilment of packages of care, both in domiciliary care, but also care homes. So we'll be keeping an eye on that over the winter. Yeah, it's a real worry, and it's something that also the A&E Delivery Board that's chaired by David Eltringham and George Elliott has looked at, particularly the worry over the kind of longer weekend period associated with Christmas this year. So we're on it, but I don't think we could give it too much attention.
Yeah, no, I think it's also quite powerful to say that the chair of our clinical governance committee, Dr. David Spraggart, is similarly concerned on the system's behalf. I just think it adds a level of weight to it.
I will drop that particular name into the conversation.
It always helps. Fine. Thank you, Glenn. If there are no other questions to David, we'll move on then to the Foundation Group Strategy Subcommittee. Glenn?
Yes, as requested, I won't go through the detail of this. Just to draw to board members' attention, the digital updates, the full papers of the Group Strategy Committee are available on our online portal if you wanted to have a look at that, because there's some really good examples of some of the projects that are coming out of the Digital Hub. Otherwise, it was a good meeting, lots going on, and at our next meeting, we'll be joined by our Worcestershire colleagues.
Great, look forward to that. Any questions to Glenn on the Foundation Group? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Glenn. We're all handing over the keys in the background then. We'll move on then to the report from the Council of Governors meeting on the 11th of November, which I will take as read. Again, I'd just like to put on record my thanks to all of the governors for their continued hard work and support of our work as a Foundation Trust. Any questions on the Council of Governors report, which I am speaking to? Okie dokie, so we'll move on then to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians report. Sue, lovely to see you again. What would you like to pull out of your report, please?
Start with a couple of quick amendments. So figure 1 should say support services, not clinical support services. This is the problem working over 2 organisations, isn't it? And then figure 6, just the keys missing. So S is for SWFT, P is for Coventry Warwickshire Partnership Trust, and U is for UHCW, just so that you've got a comparison of where we are on the model hospital / model system as it is now. I think it's interesting listening to you talk about the patient safe staffing, and then what Dave's just said about community services as well, because we're picking that up over the last couple of months with Freedom to Speak Up information as well. So staff are reflecting the same problems, the same concerns. We've had 4 concerns today all about safe staffing that have come in from maternity, from Farries, which Fiona mentioned, from Nicholas Ward, and then from community services as well, and health visiting. So yeah, staff are reflecting the same thing, that they feel as though the staffing levels are at a pinch point and that they're not able to give that care that they aspire to give, and that they're feeling as though they're under pressure because staff are being moved around the hospital and around the community to cover what's needed to be covered, but they're then feeling that they're not particularly safe in delivering care themselves. So it's probably timely on that report, Fiona. The other things to pick up, you'll see from the report that attitudes, behaviours, relationships still continue to be an issue. What is good is that we're really delivering the civility training out there now, and we are seeing that that's making a difference, and we're picking up conversations off the back of that training, which is great. And we're trying to help staff with colleagues in people in workforce and with the unions to try and sort out some nitty-gritty issues, which is brilliant. And then to end on a high, our ambassadors programme. So our ambassadors have always traditionally been Speak Up and Wellbeing, but they're Speak Up, Wellbeing and Inclusion now. And we've got a really good support package wrapping around those going forward, linking in with Warwickshire County Council and colleagues from across the system, and things like with staff in mind to deliver some pastoral care and some training for our ambassadors going forward, which is brilliant. So happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. So just before I invite questions, I want to make a general perspective. I really do want members of staff to feel free and encouraged to speak up when they're concerned about staffing issues. There is a national shortage of trained nurses, particularly midwives. We all know the challenges in social care as well, but it's really important our staff feel that they are encouraged to speak up, albeit the board's ability to just magic up solutions is limited. But I would never want a member of staff to feel inhibited about speaking up. Freedom to speak up is a cornerstone of our culture. Glenn, anything you'd like to add?
As ever, thanking Sue for the work that she does, and being so approachable and encouraging staff to speak up. Really pleased to see how the civility training is going and the numbers going through it. Sue, just give us a little flavour of how those sessions go.
On the whole, they're really quite positive. We get some very chatty staff who want to share all of their issues in the group, and then other times we get quite quiet staff. We've found over time that where we do targeted training to teams, they're not as engaging. We found out by doing the feedback afterwards, sometimes that's because staff are not comfortable to raise issues or speak openly about issues when their peers or managers, who they might perceive as being a problem, are there. So we tend to do the general sessions. We have done some bespoke sessions, and we are planning to do more where there are some tricky situations or where there's hotspot areas. We're doing more at George Eliot than we are at SWFT, interestingly, with like the consultant body and people like the medical director come and deliver those sessions, which adds the weight and the power behind them. Sometimes they don't listen to little old me, so so it's good. But yeah, on the whole, they're really well attended, well supported, and generate lots of discussion and debate.
Thank you. And just to reiterate Glenn's thanks for all your hard work. So you're a great ambassador for the trust and for the NHS. Thank you. Colleagues, happy to move on. There has quite rightly been a high focus on mortuary security over the last couple of months. Stephen has arranged for this report to be produced, briefing us on what we are doing. Glenn, are you picking up on this, or is Harkimer? I apologise.
I wasn't planning to, but I mean the report is there for board members to see. I mean, we obviously have always had security arrangements in place, but the the horrific findings from the review in Kent obviously led us to review this, and we were formally asked to review this nationally. So all 3 trusts in the group have been looking at measures and increasing the security arrangements we can. So you can see we're improving the quality of the cameras. We already have swipe access, and that's auditable. So we're ensuring that only those who need to enter those areas do.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions on that report? Thank you. So we talked a lot about sustainability. We had an update, the annual update this morning. Sophie, obviously this is in the public domain. Is there anything you'd particularly want to emphasise on this?
Just to pull out the great progress that's been made in the last 2 years, really, to get us into a place where we're benchmarking well against our peers. I think there's quite a lot more for our organisation to do, and hopefully the green plan that we bring back to the next board meeting will show those ambitions. It was great in the workshop to see that commitment from the board about really challenging ourselves to kind of lead the way on some of this. And then final point really is just the learning across the group. So Y Valley have done some great work on this that we're able to pick up now and run with, so we can get ahead in terms of being able to access funding in the future. So hopefully the paper sets out the progress, especially in Appendix A, all the great work that's happening. And I know we mentioned in board workshop, but just to thank Chris Collegia, who's really leading us as an organisation in this area.
Great, thank you. Any questions to Sophie? I think we missed a trick on not putting wind turbines on top of the new car park, but given the way Glenn's flag is waving in the background. Glenn?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, we've got to make a submission in January as part of a national exercise, and we will do so with some of the good work that we've already got, but we also discussed the desire to maybe develop a super green plan, which may take a little bit longer and obviously will require some resource discussions, but this will definitely be one of our core objectives for next year.
Great, and it's incredibly important. I think it was Chris who made the point. This isn't about doing the right thing for our grandchildren. This is about, again, enlightened self-interest for our generation, to protect our environment, and to do the right thing so that we can all continue to enjoy our lived experience with a climate which is reasonable rather than extremely unstable. Colleagues, happy to move on? So I think we're on to the progress report on annual trust and foundation group objectives. Glenn?
Yes, I'm not going to go through all of this. This is formed from the regular updates that we give to the Council of Governors on delivery of our objectives, marking the midpoint of the year, and obviously the need for us to continue our efforts to make sure we turn everything green by the end of the year. The only one I was going to pull out was the electronic patient record replacement programme, which whilst we set out an ambition to be probably looking at an outline business case around about now, we've needed to give that some more attention in order to ensure that it would pass through the board with the suitably identified benefits coming out of what will be a major capital or revenue investment. We'll decide which soon. So we will be ideally joining UHCW in implementing the same system as them, but they will be moving forward with their own implementation early next year. So we've got 1 or 2 ways in which we could join them, either part way along or through a separate instance of the same IT system. But that's one that's certainly with the focus that Anne's given it since taking on SRO, that's in a better place than it was a few weeks ago, and we'll update you probably next time we meet.
Great, thank you. Any other questions to Glenn on the half-year midpoint? So 1-0 up, and it's all to play for in the second half. Okie dokie, thank you. So summary of ratified policies, Anne.
Nothing to add to the paper, or to add, just their information on the smart card policy, which has been ratified.
Great, thank you. Any questions to Anne on the ratified policies? Okay, we'll then move on to the SWFT research strategy, and as Glenn indicated in his magnum opus, the exciting news over the last month of a cementing of our relationship with Warwick Medical School as we aim to become a university trust. And a cornerstone of that is our research strategy, which we've discussed a few times as a board. Charles, what would you particularly like to emphasise?
I think just to say that the reason we want to do research and take it to the next level is there's very good evidence it improves the quality of care for our patients and our ability to recruit staff. And this is an opportunity that comes out of the foundation group of having access to a lot of integrated care and all the things we do, you know, at place. And it's an opportunity that we need to grasp with both hands and make the partnerships and develop our research. I think there's also, although there will need to be investment to get things going, there's lots of opportunity to bring in finance, you know, as things develop. So I think that's all I'd like to say, but something to be grasped with both hands.
No, great. Thank you, Charles. Any questions or perspectives from colleagues on the research strategy? Okay, thank you, Charles. And so we'll move on then to the updated register of directors and register of directors' interests. Sarah?
Thanks, Russell, and happy to take the reports read. Just to note that I'll need to add Rosemary's declared interest for being employed by South Warwickshire GP Federation.
Great.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you. Any questions on the Directors' Register of Interest apart from that one amendment? Okie dokie. Then we've got a paper on just summarising the current NED's allocation of responsibilities to the different subcommittees that we have. I'd just like to emphasise again my thanks to my non-exec colleagues for their hard work across these subcommittees. We are 2 NEDs down at the moment since Jeff Bairn and Chris Lewington have left us, and I know the other NEDs have sort of picked up the weight of work in the subcommittees as a result, so I do just want to thank colleagues. Are you all happy to receive and note that? What I would say to the NEDs is the cavalry is arriving. The recruitment process, which our hard-working Governor Roger Lloyd is leading as chair of the nominations committee, is ongoing, and then we are expecting a NED from Warwick Medical School to be joining us in the new year as well. So fingers crossed there'll be 4 new NEDs in the new year. Okay, thank you for pulling that together, Sarah. So we then move on to the different board committee minutes, and we've got from the 13th of October the Clinical Governance Committee meeting minutes. David, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, no, thanks. No, nothing.
Thank you, David. Any questions to David on those minutes? Okay, so I think we're on to any other business. Any other business, colleagues, please raise the digital hand. Just one from me. Shall I go first, Bruce?
Please do.
So I just wanted to come back to what I said at the start. This is Bruce's last meeting with us as a board, as we don't have a board meeting in January. Bruce has been an incredibly hardworking, committed, high integrity, non-executive director. I could not have asked for a better ambassador for the trust. And in all areas of his involvement, Bruce has, I think, always brought a very calm, considered, understanding but demanding character to the role. So, Bruce, we will all miss you immensely. Like I said, you did become my deputy chair under somewhat challenging circumstances, and I really appreciate the way you stood up and to be willing to take that role, and I've never regretted you being my deputy ever since. So Bruce, on behalf of all of the board, on behalf of the Council of Governors, on behalf of the citizens of Warwickshire that we serve, round of applause. Thank you, Bruce. And Bruce?
Thank you, Russell. I just wanted to say thank you, colleagues, for your good wishes and kind words, very generous words. I loved the e-card that arrived this morning. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you all, your predecessors and all your teams. I'd like to leave you with one key challenge: to keep SWFT amongst the best. And I do expect that to do that, shamelessly stealing great ideas from elsewhere, especially the Foundation Group is going to be part of it, and keep on making the best decisions for the people and the patients. And above all, keep on delivering great care. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bruce. And I will be recommending to the Council of Governors meeting in February that Simon Page becomes the Vice Chair when Bruce stands down. So that will be put towards the Council of Governors in February. So I think we're then on to any questions from members of the public or governors. If I know we've had one, Sarah, and whilst members of the public may be thinking, do you just want to read out the question that I'm aware we have had?
Yeah, so we've had a question from Roger Lloyd. In referring to the NHS Providers Conference in the Chief Executive's report, reference is made to positive discrimination in the context of waiting lists. Is this intended to be discrimination by BAME or protected characteristics, or by length of wait and acuity? If the reasons are for lack of advocacy on behalf of the patient, who or how is this to be overcome? Glenn, I think you're going to answer this one, aren't you?
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for Roger for picking up on that question. There is a lot of data now that shows that people who have deprivation indicators, but also inequalities, do wait longer for NHS care and have worse outcomes as a result of that. And another indicator of this is during COVID. So if you look at the impact of COVID, the most deprived parts of the country, waiting lists have grown by 50%, and the least deprived by about a third. So a significant further deterioration. So what we've started to do is to look at deprivation markers for each individual patient on our waiting list, and those scores are then considered as we look at when we pull people into the waiting list. The data I'm referring to in my report shows that people who don't have those deprivation indicators generally get seen more quickly. They somehow find their way to the front of the waiting list. And it's hard to get to the heart of why that is, but it is probably because of things like not having their own ability to advocate for themselves, but also other people ensuring that their treatment is prioritised. So what that leads us to is a conclusion that we need to prioritise those individuals to ensure that they get better outcomes as a result of that prioritisation. So we started to do that, and we've certainly the work that Harkamel and team have done here on those indicators has been really helpful. It's a range of protected characteristics as well as some of the postcodes associated with deprivation. But I mean, for example, individuals with learning disabilities prioritising their treatment because they suffer more as a consequence of not having early access to treatment has proven to be a really worthwhile thing to do. So that's what it's about, Roger. I'm happy to talk more about the details within it, but I think, I mean, Harkamel's an expert on this, I found out the other day. I mean, she could talk at length about the social economic factors as to why people may be waiting longer with those inequalities and those deprivation scores, but it's something we definitely need to proactively target.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roger. Any other questions from members of the public or governors? So Bruce, I assume that's a legacy hand. So clearly this is our last board before Christmas. Can I be one of the first to wish everyone on the call a very Merry Christmas. Take care. Look after your neighbours. Make sure you have the booster. Wear your mask in public. Sensibly socially distance and wash your hands. But it's going to be a tough couple of months for everyone in the trust, and we really do need all to pull together and to make sure our partners in the system are pulling in the same direction. Thank you very much, everyone. For board colleagues, I suggest we have a 10-minute comfort break and we start the confidential board at 3:30. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and happy Christmas.